Hi and hello. My name is Ben, and welcome to Little Dead Aliens. This is the podcast where I watch episodes of The X-Files and then give horror movie recommendations based on those episodes. Sometimes a guest joins me. Today I am all by myself, which can be a little spooky, but that's okay because we like that, right? Because we're horror fans. Yeah. Anyways, today we are talking about season 1 episode Miracle Man. This is an episode that is a little not great, I guess I would say. It's just kind of boring, I think. Um and for some reasons that I'll get into more when I talk about the episode. But yeah, Miracle Man, there's not much to say about the episode. Let me just go through really quick what happens in the episode. So we open in 1983. We're at the site of an accident. It's sort of hard to tell what kind of accident it is. There's like a bunch of firefighters there, so it might be just a fire. But it also gives the sense of like a car accident. It doesn't really matter, but we see a man and his son. They're watching everything, and in the sort of crowd of people around whatever's happening, there's a dead man who's in a body bag, and the fireman is like, hey, we need to move this guy along so we can help the people who are not dead. And the little boy starts praying over the man in the body bag, and he comes back to life. He's like really badly burned though, so he's got a lot of like scars and really bad burns. And then we jump to the present. Mulder and Scully are investigating this. The boy is now in his 20s. His name is Samuel. He is a faith healer. His father is the pastor of this like sort of like tent revival type church. And Mulder and Scully are investigating them because the sheriff of the town where he operates believes that Samuel is killing people. The sheriff is also very skeptical and thinks that they're a scam. So he wants to shut them down because of that. But now he is suspecting Samuel of killing people because people that he is claiming to heal are dying. So they go to this small town to investigate. One of the issues with the investigation is that the people are members of this church community, and the church doesn't want them to do autopsies. So no one has been doing autopsies to figure out what's actually happening to the people. So there is a scene where they go to I guess the FBI and Mulder and Scully have like the power to exhume these bodies even against the people's will. So they go to the cemetery at night to exhume these bodies. There's probably, I think, visually the coolest and most horror scene of the episode is when all of the like church people come to the cemetery to like stop them from exhuming the body. They've all got these little like lantern, possibly candles. In my mind, I remember them as candles, but I think they're little lanterns. Just kind of a spooky visual. But so they're not going to exhume the body, but they do find out that Samuel is at a bar. So they go to this bar to talk to Samuel and arrest him, I guess. And he's talking to Mulder and Scully. And he's basically confessing to the murders, and he's saying that he's lost his faith and that he's, done wrong. And that's why his gift of healing people is being turned against him and hurting people instead. He also has a conversation with Mulder about pain that Mulder is carrying around and the loss of his sister when he was really young, which we know happened to Mulder. His sister was taken or abducted or whatever. That's only important because throughout the rest of the episode, Mulder keeps seeing what he thinks is his sister appearing in various places. So he's arrested during his probation hearing. I believe that's what is going on. They're in a courtroom for a hearing, and the courtroom is flooded with grasshoppers to sort of mimic the plagues from the Old Testament. This freaks everyone out. Samuel is given bail, so he's out, and Mulder and Scully and the sheriff all go to the service, and he is attempting to heal this girl, and the girl falls over and dies in front of them. During this, Mulder is like searching through the crowd because he thinks he saw a sister. So he's like not paying attention to whatever's happening. The girl who died, her parents do allow them to do an autopsy. So because of this, Scully finds cyanide and other traces of poison, I think, which determine that she was killed through poison, which also means that Samuel didn't do it for somehow they come to that conclusion. While Samuel is in jail, the deputy lets two guys in and they beat Samuel to death, which is kind of crazy. And I don't know. I assume the motivation is because the deputy thinks he's like scamming people and now killing people. And him and other people in the community are not okay with that. So he lets these people kill Samuel. So also during all of that, through their investigation, Mulder and Scully discovered that Vance, the guy that was saved in the beginning, who is now badly burned, he is the one who is setting up Samuel to look like he's killing people because he resents him for bringing him back to life, because he's now like very badly scarred and like has lived his whole life just devoted to Samuel and his father because he brought him back to life. So he bought all the grasshoppers and put them in the courtroom, and he is poisoning these people to set Samuel up and make it look like he is killing people. And they determine all of that. As they are going to Vance's house to arrest him, we see Vance up in his room, and Samuel appears to him as a ghost or something and is like, why are you killing people? This isn't cool. And Vance drinks cyanide. They get into the room, of course, right as he's dying. And that is that. They get a call that Samuel's body is missing, and a nurse saw him walking away, which is, I think this is 3 days after he's supposed to be dead. So there's that whole thing. But yeah, this one of the reasons I think that this episode feels a little less fun, and because there's not a lot of brevity to it, but also just because everything is sort of explained away. So often in most of these episodes, we see Scully giving an explanation, Mulder giving an explanation, and it's sort of left ambiguous at the end, which is like true and what actually happened. But this one, there are a few of those elements with the idea of like, where did his body go, which could be easily explained away as someone just took the body. But we know why everything happened, like the grasshoppers, all the mysterious elements, people dying. We get an explanation for those that are very clear. And even with Vance seeing the quote unquote ghost of Samuel and having that conversation with him could be explained away as just like he had drank this poison, or he's hallucinating because of his guilt, or just a manifestation of that guilt and psychosis. So everything in this episode can very much be tied down to like a reasonable explanation. And I think that makes it a little less fun. So that's what happened in this episode. There aren't a lot of themes and tropes to this one. I think a couple themes that really stand out to me, like the main one would be the idea of like faith and losing faith. And Samuel is sort of like struggling with his faith and his identity because he thinks that he's done something wrong, and that's turned it against him, and why his healing abilities aren't working. The only movie that really stood out for me with this theme is Signs from 2002, which is an M. Night movie. I'm sure most people have seen this movie, but it has a lot to do with the idea of like losing faith and then regaining it. And I do like this movie. I know a lot of people don't for a lot of reasons, but I think it's effective horror-wise and a lot of different scenes. And it's one of M. Night's better movies. There's also the theme of revenge. Vance is trying to get revenge and take out his resentment on Samuel and his father. But revenge is like a theme in horror that is present a lot. So even with a theme of like a loss of faith and crisis of faith is not super popular within horror. The idea of revenge is. So I didn't really want to go down the rabbit hole of like revenge movies. We don't see a lot of tropes either. I think, like I mentioned, the scene in the cemetery feels the most like horror to me scene of anything in the episode. And even then, it's not a trope that we can really tie back to any specific movies, I don't think. It's just like a kind of a creepy scene of a bunch of people outside with lights in a cemetery. And then with the ghost, quote unquote, ghost of Samuel, we do see ghosts, and we see that trope in horror a lot. So I kind of wanted to talk about, instead, sort of go through a history of what we refer to now as religious horror. This is a term that I hear a lot over the past probably 5 or 6 years, which is, I think the term has been coined and we hear it applied to horror now because in the past 5 or 6 years, we have seen a lot of these. Um, and I just kind of wanted to go through and sort of look at a history of horror and where this idea of religious fits in. We see it mostly in a kind of Catholic nuns, priests, exorcism, and demons is mostly where we see it. I think if someone says religious horror to you, that's where your mind is going to go. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why that is. So, as early as 1922, we get movies like Haxan, and these are movies that sort of explore the idea of religion and horror. So, it's been a theme and something we've seen in horror since there were horror movies. From the 20s up to the 60s, we are going to see a lot of those. A lot of them have to do with like witches and witch trials. That sort of theme is really heavy during this period, and sort of where we see this idea of what we would call religious horror really stands out. In the 60s, we also get a lot of those movies like Burn, Witch, Burn, Witch's Mirror, Demon, The Witches. Just a lot of like witch horror. It's very much the idea of, and as I have been sort of researching and making a list to talk about this history, and it's definitely not going to be exhaustive. I bit of research, but I didn't want to go like exhaustive and like talk about every movie. I just kind of wanted to look at a broader, kind of zoom out and see a broader idea of like where this stuff is fitting in to horror, because that's what I enjoy, looking at for those contexts and seeing how cultural things might affect the way these movies are being made. So yeah, in the 60s, we see a lot of these witches movies. And then in 1967, Ira Levin releases the book Rosemary's Baby. And I think if we're talking about religious horror, I think the big focus is going to be in the 60s and 70s, and it's really centered around three pretty big things, which would be Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and The Omen. I think these are the three that sort of set the tone culturally to say that this is what's scary. And if you know anything about horror, you know that The Exorcist is sort of the movie that people consider a lot of the time to be sort of the scariest movie they've seen or the scariest movie of all time. It's infamous, of course, for people in the theaters when it came out just being so shocked that they were fainting or leaving the theater or vomiting and all these things. And at this point, it's really hard to know what is fact or fiction based around those stories. But I'm not sure it really matters. It's just sort of ingrained in the idea of The Exorcist that it's that scary that it would make people do this. But we also have to take into account that this is the first time a lot of people are seeing this sort of imagery. But the imagery of these three movies specifically, I think, are really what set the tones and the tropes and the ideas for everything we see after. I think these movies are the ones where people decided like this is scary. And in horror, I think it's really difficult for people to let go of certain imagery and tropes. And so we just keep recycling them. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's definitely true in these sorts of movies. So just to get back to sort of a timeline, in 67, Rosemary's Baby, the book, comes out by Ira Levin. In 68, the movie comes out. In 71, the book written by Peter Blatty of The Exorcist is released. We do get The Devils in 71, which is a movie where a priest is accused of being a witch. It's a Ken Russell movie. In 72, we get Daughters of Satan, a movie called Hungry Wives, The Devil. All of these, again, have a lot to do with witchcraft and women being evil. In 73, we get The Exorcist movie. We get Wicker Man, the movie. We get a movie called Satan's School for Girls, a movie called Sex of the Witch. Again, I would say The Wicker Man did what The Exorcist and Rosemary Baby, The Omen did for sort of Catholic themed religious horror. The Wicker Man did for like pagan cult horror. The Wicker Man is sort of the standard for that stuff. Everything is going to be compared to it. It was sort of the first big movie that did this sort of look at a pagan religion that wasn't based on Christianity. And I really love The Wicker Man. But yeah, so 73 was a pretty big year. In 74, we get the book The Sentinel from Jeopardy Convents, which would become a movie. We also get the movies like Enter the Devil, Messiah of Evil. In 76, we get the Omen movie. We get a movie called The Tenant, which is like sort of a Rosemary's Baby kind of deal where there's like a creepy apartment where people are being weird. So it's very much similar to Rosemary's Baby. In 77, we get the movie for The Sentinel. We get The Omen 2, which is kind of crazy that The Omen 2 came out a year after the first Omen. In 78, we get the book The Stand by Stephen King, which would become a really popular text and a look at the idea of like good versus evil. Again, sort of based on Christianity. I guess there's no real specifics about, God and the devil or whatever. It's just sort of good versus evil. But yeah, The Stand, I think, is pretty important if we're talking about religious horror. In 79, we get Amityville Horror, which would become a sort of staple in the horror genre. And then we get to the 80s. So the 80s, we don't see a lot of religious horror. I think in the 70s, a lot of what we were seeing in popular horror was based on this. And I think, again, in horror, a lot of what we see in these cycles is something becomes really popular and effective in horror, and then people mimic it and try to make their own versions of it. And then, or just we see a lot of things that are very similar, that something else hits and makes a lot of money, and then we sort of copy that for a cycle. And like, that's kind of the cycle that we see happening in horror over and over. So in the 80s, we don't see a lot of religious horror. The 80s is sort of the time of the slasher because movies like Friday the 13th become really popular and make a lot of money. So that becomes what people are making and producing. But in the 80s, we do get some. In 81, we get Omen 3. We get Evil Dead, which I don't consider religious horror, but I do think it's important to look at Evil Dead and things like Evil Dead, which are looking at this idea of possession as not like a serious thing. Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 are considered very campy and leaning more towards the unserious. And until this, possession is sort of taken very seriously, and we see it as like, a very dire, serious thing that we should take seriously. And Evil Dead sort of feels like the first time where we're sort of not taking it that seriously and poking fun at it even a little bit. And I think that's important. I think in the 80s, people were less concerned about religion and looking at other things, and I think it's interesting to see how the horror sort of reflects what people are thinking about religion. And I live in America. In America, certainly Christianity seems to be sort of the dominating force religiously. So looking at it and taking a broader look at these ideas, it's interesting to me to see sort of where culturally we are and what we're thinking about religion. In the 80s, we do also get sort of the satanic panic, the height of the satanic panic. So I think if it's that overtly in our faces of like everything is evil and Satan is everywhere and Satanists are ruining everything, we're not going to see it in horror movies as much because horror seems to be subversive and it wants to sort of tell us what we're afraid of at the time. So if something is overtly in our societies a horror that we're seeing, I don't think we're going to see it in the movies as much. But in 82, we do get Poltergeist, which again, I don't necessarily think of as religious horror, but we do have the medium who is there to help them get rid of the ghost, which is a different sort of religion. It's not based in Christianity. We get a movie called Black Candles. In 84, we get Children of the Corn, which is another Stephen King franchise. And this is centered more like cult, but we do see the kids being creepy and preaching. So I wanted to include it. I'm not going to talk about other Children of the Corn movies because that and Amityville are franchises. It doesn't matter what's happening culturally or what, like if we're seeing a lot of religious movies or not. Those two franchises are always putting out movies, always, every decade. In 86, we get Poltergeist 2, which we do see like the creepy ghost priest guy, which is pretty cool. We got Witchboard in 86 and 87. We have Prince of Darkness. We have the Hellraiser movies, which again don't really feel like religious movies, but they are called Hellraiser. So they're from hell, I guess, the Cenobites. In 88, we see Night of the Demons. We see Witchery. We see The Seventh Sign. We see a movie called The Unholy. In 89, we see a movie called Witch Trap and a movie called Warlock, which is about a 17th century warlock who he's trying to escape from a witch hunt and is in the 80s. Sounds kind of cool. But again, all of these movies sort of feel more like this is just, it's less about like a religious horror or an exploration of the horror in the late 80s and more about like this is just sort of an ends to the mean. Like we need a reason that these people are bad things are happening or people are evil. So that's the reason. So in the 90s, we know that early 90s, everyone is sort of sick of slashers. The horror world has been overexposed with slashers because everyone was doing them and making them to try to make money. And early 90s, horror just was not that big of a thing and people weren't really paying attention or going to the movies to see horror. And then in the mid 90s, we get stuff like Scream, which revitalizes the genre. And then we get more of that. So in the 90s, again, we don't see a ton of religious themed horror. And so in 1990, we do get The Exorcist 3. We get a movie called Repossessed, which is like a parody of these sort of exorcism movies, which again is just sort of showing us that at this point, it's something that's not taking us seriously, something that can be poked fun at, to the point where there's a whole movie sort of about that. In 91, we get a movie called Night of the Hunter. We get Teenage Exorcist. We get The Omen 3, which stars Sam Neill. Rest in peace. In 93, we get Witchboard 2. In 94, we get the TV show miniseries adaptation of The Stand. We get Night of the Demons 2, which takes place at a Catholic school and is really fun. In 95, we get The Prophecy and a movie called Day of the Beast, which is like a bonkers movie. In 96, we see The Craft. We see a movie called Invisible Temptation, which is about a teen boy who joins a satanic cult. In 97, we get a movie called Black Circle Boys, which is about a boy who joins a satanic cult. We get The Devil's Advocate. We also see, I guess, sort of starting with The Devil's Advocate in the late 90s, we see a lot of these thrillers that are leaning more towards like religious and the devil and stuff. Again, I think all of this, if you look at it, is really sort of really makes sense to me that it's kind of in conversation with the satanic panic. So as I just mentioned, in 96 and 7, we get movies that are about like a teen boy who joins a satanic cult. And like everybody's just scared of that's what's going to happen. I was a teen in the 90s and around this time and, grew up in churches and everyone's terrified that everyone was going to be a Satanist, which is crazy. But yeah, that's sort of how my world operated, was that everything was the devil, everything was out to get you. And if you, join the wrong friend group, you were going to become a Satanist. So these are two movies that are like very directly in conversation with that idea. But in 97, we get The Devil's Advocate, which is the Al Pacino movie. In 98, we get The Prophecy 2. We get Fallen, another sort of thriller that's about demons. In 99, we do get Idle Hands. It's like a horror comedy. I really love this movie, but it also just feels like a sort of pushback against the idea of the satanic panic, and it's definitely poking fun at the idea, because in this movie he's like a slacker stoner who doesn't want to do anything, and his hand becomes so idle that it is able to be possessed by a demon, which then starts killing people, which just feels very much like sort of poking fun at the idea of like something's going to make you evil or satanic or whatever. So it's nice to see that mixed in with all the very serious stuff of like, we're actually panicking about this, but like it's good to see these movies that are sort of pushing against idea or poking fun at that idea, taking it less seriously. But in 99, we also get a movie called Resurrection. We get Stigmata. We get End of Days, which is the one where Arnold Schwarzenegger fights the devil. In the 90s, we do get 4 Amityville horror movies. sequels, and we get 4 Children in the Corn sequels. So, like I said, they're always there. They're always going to be there. In the 2000s, we see fewer religious based horror. Maybe the fewest that we see is in the 2000s. So, in 2000, we get Bless the Child, we get Possessed, where a kid is possessed. We get The Calling, which is about sort of an omen story where a woman thinks her son is the Antichrist. In 2001, we get Frailty. In 2002, as I mentioned, we get Signs. We get a movie called Witchcraft, which is about witches. And I included a lot of movies about witches in here because, Wicca and witchcraft is considered a religion. Um, I think we sort of separate those as two different genres. But if we're talking about religious horror, I wanted to include as many other religions that weren't Christianity or Catholicism as possible. There just aren't that many. Oh, I should have mentioned this at the beginning too, that this is not my favorite sort of horror, specifically the Catholic exorcism type movies. I just don't enjoy them very much. So if I'm missing any, it's probably because I haven't seen them or they're not on my radar just because I don't really like that stuff as much. But yeah, so we get in 2002, we get Signs, which is a good movie and sort of an exploration of faith that isn't necessarily all about that and feels a little more honest to what someone might be going through than some of these other movies where it's just like point across at a demon. In 2006, so like I said, I probably missed some stuff, but a jump from 2002 to 2006 without any other notable religious type horror, that's kind of a big gap. So in 2006 we get The Covenant, which is sort of like The Craft but boys. So not necessarily even religious horror, just more like they're boys and they're witches. In 2005, we get The Exorcism of Emily Rose. In 2007, we get a movie called The Reaping. We get the Paranormal Activity movie, which we learn is like demons is what's causing all of the havoc in the home. So the Paranormal Activity will become a franchise that is a standard and staple for the horror genre for the next coming years. In 2008, we get a movie called Chemical Wedding, which is about a professor who brings Aleister Crowley back to life. The Satanist Aleister Crowley back to life. I have not seen that, but it's kind of at the top of my list now because that just sounds like a bonkers premise. In 2009, we get Drag Me to Hell, which in the movie she goes to I don't even remember what religion. I guess she's a witch. She goes to the witch to sort of help her. So that's a good one. In the 2000s, we do get 2 Children of the Corn sequels. So there's that. 2010s is pretty similar to the 2000s. We do see more, though, for sure. In 2010, we get Devil, which is the one about the people in the elevator, and one of them is the devil. We get The Last Exorcism in 2011. We get Red State, which is the Kevin Smith movie, and it is more focused on the idea of like the American church, and not so much like Catholics, which is kind of cool. We get the movie The Rite. We get a movie called 11-11-11, which again is about like sort of the omen type. There's a creepy kid that's bringing about the apocalypse. In 2012, we get Lords of Salem. We get The Devil Inside. 2013, we get The Sacrament, which is a found footage movie about a Jonestown type cult. We get The Conjuring, which I'm not a huge fan of the Conjuring universe. I think I've said that before here, but this movie is important because I think it sort of starts the ball rolling again where people are interested in this kind of religious horror where it's the Christians fighting the demons. And this really brings it back. We see the nun in this universe, which is again going to bring this back around because these movies are very popular and they make a lot of money. We also have This Is the End, which is a movie about the apocalypse, like Book of Revelation. It's a comedy horror. I really enjoy this movie, but yeah, it's very much poking fun at the idea of the end of times. And then 2014, we get Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. There have been several paranormal movies between this one and the last one I mentioned. I just wanted to mention this one because in this one, it's about a bunch of Mexican American teens who are seeking help from their like grandmothers and stuff, a religion that's not necessarily Christianity. And I thought that was cool. I really like this one. A lot of people don't like it, but I enjoyed it. In 2015, we get The Witch, Robert Eggers' movie. Again, this is one, I think between this and The Conjuring, these are the movies that really bring this idea of witches and, Christians fighting demons, bring these back to the forefront of horror and starts the cycle again because, The Witch is great. We get a movie called The Vatican Tapes. We get The Black Coat's Daughter, which is Osgood Perkins, I think his first movie, which is about a possession. And in 2016, we get A Dark Song, which is a movie that I really love. It's about this woman who's lost her child, and she's doing this really long sort of occult ritual to get a wish to hopefully bring her child back. We also get The Love Witch, which is sort of a parody of 70s witch movies and a revenge tale where this witch is sort of getting revenge on the men who have wronged her. And it's stylistically really great, but it's sort of coming full circle with all the witch stuff from the 70s where the women were usually evil and accused of being witches and like bad. This is sort of full circle of that where she's stepping into the power and like using it against the people who have wronged her. In 2017, we get a movie called The Crucifixion. We get a movie called American Satan, both very on the nose, very much like, especially with like a movie like American Satan, where it's really talking about the satanic panic and it's really sort of a different view and idea of what that looked like. In 2018, we get The Nun, which is, a spinoff of the Conjuring universe. We get Hereditary, which again is one of the movies I think that really brought back the sort of Wicker Man cult idea to horror because it was very popular and very well received. We get a movie called Sword of God. We get Apostle. In 2019, we get Saint Maud, which it's crazy to me that this came out in 2019. It seems like a movie that came out much more recently. But anyways, Saint Maud is another movie that sort of brought, and again, it came out the year after The Nun. So these two closely together, I think, revitalized the idea of nuns and horror and creepy nuns. We get The Vigil, which is based more around like Jewish religion about a man who is with a corpse overnight. And it's really creepy. I really like that movie a lot. We get Midsommar, which is another cult movie. And then we get one called Satanic Panic. It's literally called Satanic Panic. This is more horror comedy than anything else. But again, just showing us that we're now sort of poking fun at that idea. We're so far removed from the idea that we're like, oh, that's silly. That will never happen again. We'll never have that kind of moral panic again. But, of course, we know everything's cyclical and we will go through that again. We're currently going through that. Anyways, we also get We Summon the Darkness, which is another sort of satanic panic movie about these girls who go to this metal show and then that one's really good. So I think the 2010s really sort of revitalized the idea of religious horror and brought it back to the forefront of horror because in the 2020s, we see more movies than we have ever before that are sort of rooted in this. In 2020, we get Craft Legacy, which is, a witch movie. We get another adaptation miniseries of The Stand on TV. We get a movie called The Evil Night. We get a movie called The Dark and the Wicked. In 2021, we get the Conjuring movie, which is the subtitle is literally The Devil Made Me Do It, where they're, trying to help this kid get off from murder by convincing everyone that the devil made him do it. We get the TV show Midnight Mass. We get Paranormal Next of Kin, which is sort of a cult movie also. We get a movie called Lucifer, spelled with the Z, Luzifer. There's a show called 30 Coins, which is really good. It's a Spanish show. And this is about the 30 coins that Judas got for betraying Jesus, basically are getting in the hands of people and causing lots of havoc and not good stuff. And this priest is sort of trying to find them. So that's a pretty cool show. There's a movie called Agnes, which is a nun movie. There's a movie called The Medium, which is a Thai movie, which is about a religion that isn't Christianity whatsoever, which is pretty cool. We get a movie literally called The Exorcism of God. 2022, we get Pray for the Devil, which is like about like demon possession has become so crazy that the Catholic Church has like started exorcist schools, and I guess a nun is really good at exorcising demons. So it's very Catholic. There's a movie called Glorious, which I really did not like, but it's about this guy who is like trapped in a bathroom with like a godlike entity. We get The Long Night, which is a cult movie. We get The Offering, which is based more on the Jewish religion. In 2023, we get a movie called The Inhabitants. This is like a really just about like youth group church trauma. It literally becomes like a manifestation of his trauma that's like causing havoc, which looks like ghosts or whatever. We get a movie called The Hood Witch, which I really enjoyed, but is very much like a witch trial movie set in modern day. We get When Evil Lurks, which is really great. There's a movie called Sleep, which is foreign, but there's a lot of foreign religious stuff happening that's very similar to like exorcism stuff. We get a movie called Resurrected. This one is about, it's like set, I think, in the future, and the Catholic Church has learned how to resurrect people from the dead. So everyone's being resurrected, but these people who have been resurrected are killing people. So they're like trying to investigate to find out why that is. We get The Pope's Exorcist, which is the first of the Russell Crowe exorcism movies. We get The Nun 2. We get Late Night with the Devil. We get a movie called Mind, Body, Spirit, which is more like Wiccan ritual type stuff. We get Exorcist Believer. We get a movie called Consecration, which is a nun movie. We get a movie called Deliver Us, which is a nun movie. That's all 2023. In 2024, there's a movie called Shaman, which is really interesting because it is a possession movie, but it's about a missionary couple who are in a foreign country. I don't remember which one at this point in time, but their son becomes possessed. And what's interesting about this one is that the people there are like, your God can't do anything about this possession because it has nothing to do with your God. You need to, do our religious stuff to get rid of the possession. So I just thought that was a really interesting take. And also just, reminds us that Christianity, America, is not the center of the universe as we are so often led to believe. There's a movie from 2024 called Pastor Nostra and the Mission of Light, which is like a cult movie. It's found footage. It's pretty cool. We get Heretic, which is, did really well. It was big in the horror world. We get The Deliverance, which is, I think it's a Netflix movie, but it's about a possession. And this one's really good. I think it's a modern day possession movie that hits really hard and is really effective. There's also a movie called St. Clair, which is about a girl who is sort of haunted / possessed, and she's like killing bad people, guys, and this leads her to like a trafficking ring that she's trying to take down, which is interesting because it's sort of combining these religious aspects with this like modern fear of like trafficking. We also get a new exorcism movie. We get the movie Tarot, which we see a lot of like seance, Ouija boards, and like stuff in horror. Tarot is, obviously a religious practice for a lot of people. And we don't see it a ton in horror. When we do, it's kind of hokey, but this one is built all around the idea of tarot, which is kind of cool and interesting. We get The First Omen, which is again another nun movie. There's a movie called The Severed Son, which is about a pastor's daughter who is being accused of being a witch because there have been murders in their small community. We get Immaculate, which is another nun movie. We get Azrael, which is set in the future, and it's a cult movie. We get Exuma, which is a foreign movie, which is really cool, about sort of demons possessions that aren't Christian based. The Front Room with Brandy in 2024, where the sort of protagonist is the old lady who's like very religious. And we got Apartment 7A, which is like a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. And it kind of treads all the same ground as Rosemary's Baby, Cult, Satan. In 2025, last year, we also got a bunch. We got The Carpenter's Son, which is like literally like a Jesus story horror movie. It's not scary. I don't know if I would call it horror, but it's really about Jesus as a young boy and being tempted by the devil. We got Bring Her Back, which is again another like sort of witch ritual movie. Shadow of God. This is a low budget one, which is like an exorcist priest. He might be an ex priest, but anyways, he's doing exorcisms. And this one is, I don't really know. It's interesting. At some point, he learns that God wants him to not do exorcists or something because God wants the demons to take over so he can like end the world. I don't remember exactly what happens, but the plot is something similar to that. It's just an interesting take on the movie. It is low budget, but and a lot of the CGI and effects at the end are like not great, but it's an interesting idea. There's a movie called The Surrender from last year, which if you like a dark song, you should watch Surrender because it's sort of similar. A girl goes to be with her mom as her father is dying. And then she learns after her father has died that her mom has basically used all of the savings, everything that would be her inheritance to pay this person to bring her father back from the dead. And it's really good, but it reminded me a lot of A Dark Song, which is a movie I really liked. And I think a lot of people really liked. And then we got Conjuring Last Rites, which is supposed to be the last Conjuring movie. And then this year, even we got The Mummy, which is a possession movie, but it's not. I mean, I guess it's sort of a demon, but it's like the Egyptian kind of demon. They Will Kill You, which is like a cult Satan movie, and then The Dreadful, which is I didn't enjoy very much, but has a lot of faith elements and stuff about faith and religion. So yeah, I don't know if this is the kind of thing that people enjoy hearing. I enjoy these sort of like dives into like a history of a certain sort of horror quite a bit. So I would like to do it more often. If people hate it, I guess I can just go back to a more similar format to what I've been doing. I thought I would give sort of an idea of which of these I think Mulder and Scully would like best. Of everything that I talked about, I think Scully would be really into Rosemary's Baby from '68. I just think Scully has always been someone who like wants to be like domestic and a homemaker and just never sort of did. I think she sort of chose Mulder and the X-Files over that life. We see that sort of as a theme throughout the show. So I think that she would really like the idea of the homemaking that we see in Rosemary's Baby and like the mystery of what's happening. I think it's one that she can be a little creeped out by, but also shrug it off because she doesn't really believe in this stuff. Although she does have a lot of Catholic leanings throughout the show. So she might be a little more scared of it than someone else might. But I think that Rosemary's Baby is a movie that she would put on as sort of a comfort watch. As for Mulder, I think I would go with Poltergeist 2. I think that he would be really intrigued by this one and the mystery of it, the idea of like the creepy ghost priest. I could see him seeing this maybe as a kid when he wasn't supposed to, and so it becomes like a movie that he really loves. But yeah, I think he would really like Poltergeist 2. And as for me, what I would recommend, I'm just going to give a quick 5 that I say from this list would stand out for me and would be 5 that you should watch if you're interested in this idea of religion and horror. I would say Shaman from 2024, just because, like I said, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening here that's different than what we're used to. Exuma from 2024 also is just so good, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. But I really, really liked it. I hope that it gets a sequel or even a franchise. I think it would make a great TV series. I'm just hoping we get more from that world. I think We Summon the Darkness from 2019. It's not the highest quality movie, but I think it's really interesting. And we get some twists that sort of make it more interesting than it might sound from the premise. Red State from 2011, the Kevin Smith movie. I really like this movie. I don't know what the sort of popular opinion of this movie is. But I thought it was really interesting. I think it's really interesting that you can tell from watching the movie. I learned after the fact that Kevin Smith said that as he was writing it, he would, once he got to this sort of an end of the scene, he would decide like, okay, let's go somewhere else completely. And even maybe like pulled things randomly to where the plot would go, because it really feels that way in a sort of subgenre that always feels very cliche and like where the story is going because they always go this way. Red State really stands out as doing things differently, and keeping you on your toes. And I really like that about that movie. I feel like I have to say The Omen 3, because if you're in the mood to watch Sam Neill stuff because of the devastating news of his passing, The Omen 3 is a great one that I think often people overlook. I didn't remember that he was in it until I think someone posted about it. So The Omen 3, it's a good one. It's fun. It's got Sam Neill, and he's really great in it. And then why not just say Wicker Man? Let's just say The Wicker Man from 1973. It's a movie I really love and I always go back to. So I think of those five, you're going to find something fun that you hopefully will enjoy. Also, The Craft Legacy, David Duchovny is in. So if you haven't seen The Craft Legacy from 2020 and you enjoyed the first movie, I liked the new one. I think a lot of people did not, but it was fun for me. So, and like I said, David Duchovny is in it. So that's awesome. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for listening. Like I said, I really enjoy doing these sort of deep dives, looking into a subgenre. I would like to do it more. So definitely let me know if you enjoy it or not. That is all for today. This has been Little Dead Aliens. Thank you so much for listening. My name's Ben. You can find me online, Instagram, Blue Sky, at Little Dead Aliens. I am part of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcasting Collective. So you can go to glitterjaw.com to learn more about my show and lots of other shows about nerdy stuff by queer people. I guess don't get possessed by a demon this week if you can help it. Good luck with that. I guess call a priest if you do. They tend to be somewhat helpful in those situations most of the time. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.